Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Lido Loca podcast. This is episode 17. Thanks so much and welcome back. My name's Tony. I am your host for today's podcast, a very special podcast, an interview podcast with Tommy Casabona from the Always Be Booked Cruising podcast. This is an OG when it comes to cruising podcasts. He's been doing it for several years, and Tommy has some great insight into cruising, some great insight into life, and I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. Recorded this conversation on April the 15th, 2020. It's now about 10 days later, and in that COVID world, 10 days makes a huge amount of difference. So we'll be talking about a few things in this podcast where the information has changed, so take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But man, a super great conversation. Look, if you enjoy these podcasts, I'll put it out right here. We are supported by your donations over there on Patreon. It's one of the ways that we fund this podcast. If you'd like to get some extra content, be a part of the Loca Extra crew, go to www.patreon.com/Lido Loca, and you can help support the podcast. And additionally, I am trying to overcome some technical hurdles when it comes to these remote podcasts. I kind of blew this one. I should have had some headphones in. There's echo on Tommy's voice. Lesson learned. The next time it will not be this way. So please make sure you push through. There's a lot of great information in this podcast. And so without much further ado, let's talk to Tommy Casabona. Well, I am excited to be here today with Tommy Casabona from the Always Be Booked podcast. Tommy, thank you so much for stopping by and having a little chat with me today. How are you doing down there in Southern Florida?
Tony, how are you? Things are going good. Getting hot. Starting to get hot.
Definitely getting hot. What's the temp down there right now?
It feels like it's pushing 90. I don't know. I didn't do a read today, but it's been upper 80s, close to around 90.
Man, we need it here, up here on the west corner, kind of the central Florida west coast. We got a swimming pool here at this rental house, and it's cold. I'm ready to get in the pool, my man.
I've seen that. That looks pretty good. You guys got a nice little setup over there with the screened-in patio. It looks nice.
We got really lucky. You know, Jenny, my lovely wife Jenny, she knew I wouldn't move unless it was really enticing, and she kind of bought me off with a pool. I don't know what that says about my character, but still. I like to swim.
Yeah, who doesn't like a good pool? Pool is an acceptable buy-off. I would say you're good.
All right. I mean, pool, that's kind of that cruise life. Let's jump into it. Tommy, so I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, a super informative guy. You know the industry, but it also sounds like you know how to have a good time. How did you get into that cruise life? What was the hook for you? How long you been doing it? Give me a little bit of your cruising history.
Well, as you mentioned, I do enjoy myself a good time, and I come from the bar and restaurant business. So the place I was running in New York City was a little bit more on the wilder side. You know, we had a mechanical bull, DJ, crazy Friday and Saturday nights. And one night we were drinking after work, and we kind of rolled into the morning, and we ended up at a bar called the Frying Pan on the Sunday. And it is on the Hudson River, so it's positioned on a sailboat. The actual bar is on a sailboat. They sell a ton of Corona, I think the most in New York State. So what happened was we were just kind of enjoying ourselves and watching, you know, the world go by as we're enjoying the Sunday. And then out of nowhere, this giant beast of a vessel comes by us, and we hear a party happening on the top deck. And I'm like, you know what? This looks like a pretty good time that's going on up there. And I'm like, you know, I wonder where they're going. My friend's like, yeah, they're going to the Bahamas, Caribbean, or wherever. I'm like, you're telling me that thing is going to the Bahamas and the Caribbean right now? I was like, you know what? Sold. Probably within the next day or so, I had my first cruise booked.
Wow. So what was your first cruise? What was your first cruise line? Where'd you go?
Well, that was the thing. It was like I can leave my bar, get on a cruise ship right out of New York City, and end up on some vessel built for fun around every corner that takes care of everything and will take you to the Caribbean. So I saw the first cruises on the Carnival Miracle. It was going to St. Thomas, San Juan, and Grand Turk, which you might notice you'll never find that now. For some reason, They don't have that. They don't have an 8-day itinerary anymore that goes to St. Thomas, San Juan, and Grand Turk. I don't know why they stopped doing those.
That's a great itinerary. How long ago was this? What was the year of your first cruise?
This was 2011, October.
2011. How many cruises have you been on since?
I think we are pushing right around 25 at this point.
Very nice, very nice. So were you hooked? Like, what was the moment on that first? I'm going to assume you got hooked on the first cruise. What was the moment during the first cruise where the light bulb went off, where it clicked, where you said, man, this is something I have to do again and again?
You know what? For me, it was sort of like mathematics. I didn't, believe it or not, have a great time on that first cruise. It wasn't a home run for me, but I was hooked before I took that first cruise. And what I knew was that this was something, if I took some notes, did it right, grabbed the right people, there was no way that this was not going to be an amazing thing. It's just, for me, it's just, especially in the position I was in. I was working 65, 70 hours a week, handling this crazy party, always having to promote these parties and make sure that they were where they were supposed to be. I loved the cruise factor where it was all just done for you. Everything you needed was right in that, whatever it is, 3 football fields long space. And it was just going to take you from island to island, and all you needed to do was just take a sip and eat and enjoy yourself, unpack once, and it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine, like, you know, New York, a lot of hustle, a lot of bustle, a real fast lifestyle, a real fast pace up there. The cruise ship was probably a little bit slower, but still probably fast enough for it to be a really good time, right?
Yeah, and Tony, you don't have to. Like, I've done land-based vacations all over the place. There is so much going on with a land-based vacation. Are you going to rent a car? Do you have to make reservations? How many trips to the Walgreens do you have to take? You know, everything. Which place or what lines are we going to stand in? It was like, this thing, forget it. It's plug and play all the way, and man, and I just, there's a sense of adventure I have about cruising. I feel like when I'm on a ship, you're not just on a vacation, you're on an adventure. You're at the mercy of Mother Nature, which is a beautiful thing, and you're just going from island to island. You just, the wave of the ocean is just taking you to whatever your destination, whatever your vacation holds next. There's a level of not control you have over it. I love it. It just, the ship's going to go where it's going to go. I love it.
Yeah, that's, you know, I've got a similar first story. My first cruise was not a bang-up great cruise. The ship we went on, Carnival Fantasy, it broke. I mean, we were supposed to go down to Cozumel for like a quick 4-day cruise, and the whole ship, it just didn't even work. And so my very first experience on the cruise ship was being stuck in the port of Mobile, which is, there's not much going on in the port of Mobile, but stuck in the port of Mobile and not sure what was going to happen. And man, I even got hooked in that situation for almost exactly what you're saying. You really don't have any other control other than booking that cruise, going and getting on that cruise ship, and then just seeing what happens. And I tell you what, you know, I was super impressed. Even on that first cruise, it didn't go the way it was supposed to go. But what I was impressed with is the fact that Carnival made that cruise as enjoyable as possible, even in a bad circumstance. And it was at that point where I said, wow, man, if the cruise life is about making the best of it and this kind of vacation, I'm completely down with it. And we cruise with other people. I don't know if you cruise with other people, but land-based vacations, we always seem to vacation with family. I love family to death, but man, as soon as you get like 3 couples together, nobody can decide on what to do. And that's what I love about the cruise ship, because in that circumstance, it doesn't matter. Everybody can do their own thing and they'll still come back together. So much less stress for me than just a regular land-based vacation. Did you go out with a big crew on your first cruise? Was there a social aspect to your first cruise?
The first cruise was with a friend, and we had a good time. They were not as excited about it as I was. She was a little, let's say on day 1 and day 2, a little feeling the motion a little bit. Oh, yeah. But I was just like, I was a kid in a candy store. So your first cruise, when was yours? How long ago was that?
It was in April of 2017. So right now, it was almost 3 years ago today. So we were on the cruise ship 3 years ago today, just figuring it out for the first time. So yeah, it's we haven't been that long in the cruise life, but yeah, we were down in Mobile, and you've been on a fantasy class, oldest, smallest cruise ship in Carnival's fleet, and that was the introduction. But I'm convinced that those small ships are the way to go when you're putting people on a cruise ship for the first time. So easy to get around that cruise ship, and just enough options that you weren't too confused, and not too many options where you were frustrated that you couldn't do everything. So I had a great time on the Fantasy.
Where was the so you said you did not have a bang up cruise, there was some obstacles that you went around. What was the other side of the pendulum? What made you hooked despite the fact that you went through all that stuff? What made you love it?
You know, so many things that are challenging with land-based vacations. Like, you know, my wife and I, we have 6 kids together, blended family. We got married about 17 years ago.
Okay.
So when you take 6 kids on vacation, it's a nightmare, man. Like, you got to make sure you got money for everything. You got to make sure that every kid is happy. And vacation for us was more just like managing everybody else's expectations. What I loved about the cruise, and worrying about money, frankly, the cool thing about going on a cruise for me is I paid that money up front, and then I put down my credit card, and then I didn't have to do anything for the rest of the cruise. I didn't have to worry about, could we eat this? Could we eat that? How much it cost? I think that's the thing that I love the most. We went cruising with family. Everybody was able to do what they wanted without a hassle, and that was the thing that hooked it for me. That cruise, it turned out okay. So basically, we got to Mobile, and we got on the cruise ship. It was supposed to leave at 4 o'clock, and about 6 o'clock, we were still at the port. They came on with an announcement that said, hey, the propulsion system's broken. So we're not going to be able to cruise. We're not going to be able to cruise to Cozumel or anywhere else. If you want to get off the cruise ship right now, we'll give you a 100% refund. But if you want to stay on the cruise ship, we're going to give you a $100 onboard credit. We're going to give you a 100% future cruise credit, and we're going to see if we can get authorization to cruise to nowhere. So I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. We had driven 2 days just so my brother who lived in Birmingham, Alabama could go. And I was like, man, we're only going to be in Cozumel for 8 hours. Why am I going to get off the cruise ship? You know, I got 4 days on the cruise ship anyways. So we stayed on. They got approved to cruise to nowhere. We left Mobile about 8 p.m. And then the next day they came on and said, look, we fixed the engines and we're going to go to Key West. So I got to go to Key West on the first cruise. So it started rocky, but it ended up very well. And again, the fact that I didn't have to worry about anything, like you say, unpack once, didn't have to worry about the money, it was a beautiful thing. I was hooked.
Totally. And then let me ask you this. I know this is, I guess, I don't mean to interview you on your own show, but
man, it's a
out of curiosity,
man, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, how long from when you really start enjoying cruising did you decide to become a creator?
Man, it happened almost immediately. So like almost everybody that, like, I hear the story a lot. I'm getting ready to go on some cruises. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos. Jenny was the queen of that. Now I'm still like, if I'm going on a new cruise ship, I don't necessarily want to see the cruise ship, see what I'm going to, I like that wonderment. I like to be like the kid, like, right. Ooh, I haven't experienced this before. So I don't watch a ton of videos, but Jenny was watching videos. And we were like, wow, these people are making videos, and we're both a little creative, but we'd never done anything like that before. But we thought, look, these people seem like regular people making videos. If they can make videos, we can make videos. And then both of us, kind of in our personal histories, our fathers passed away early. And like my dad passed away in the early 90s. And that was a time where there was not the, you know, ubiquitous cell phone camera, that kind of thing. So I didn't have a lot of audio and video of my dad talking. Like, so I was farther, you know, I was far enough away from that event where I'm like, there's times like, oh, I don't know what my dad sounds like anymore. And so since we had all the kids, we're like, this is something we could do. Now all of our kids are out of the house. We can kind of do this as empty nesters, and why not document at least this cruise so that they can hear and see us if they wanted to do that. And then we made those first videos. We made the Facebook group, and we started forming a community. And that was the cool thing, because we didn't know a lot of other people that like to cruise. The cool thing about the internet is you can find your tribe. And yeah, we just started building a little community, and then I got hooked on making the videos. I like it. I mean, I've been a writer in the past. I'm into music, and I'm like, wow, this is a new thing that I can, and I like to figure out stuff. And so I'm like, here, I never owned a camera. I never edited a video. Let's see if we can do that. And that's kind of how it started for us.
Yeah, you guys nailed it. I remember you guys used to do, it was based around those cruise wars, right? You guys would do more often than,
Yeah, we did about 40 episodes of Cruise Wars. Here's my biggest challenge. I get bored, and then when I see when I see similar stuff out there, not that I don't mind that we may have inspired people to do something similar, but then whenever I see a lot of repetition of stuff that I've already seen before, even if it's stuff that I've done, I'm like, well, what can I do now? And so, but Cruise Wars is great. I still love the format of Cruise Wars. It was kind of, you know, based off of an old like news point counterpoint show where, you know, we would take one side and I'd take one side, Jenny would take the other side, and then we would just use it as really couples therapy. We would say horrible things to each other, all for the enjoyment of other people. But there's a lot of people saying, can we bring Cruise Wars back? And it's been tempting from time to time. So, but I feel bad sometimes arguing with my wife over cruising topics, you know, but it's fun at the same time. So I heard about you. Now, when I started working on the Cruise Geeks, when I helped make that podcast with Matt Allen, he was the first person that kind of let me know who you were, the Always Be Booked podcast. And I listen to your podcast. I'm hooked. How did you get into podcasting? How did you go? Well, two questions. First of all, you don't live in New York anymore. What's that story? And then how did the podcast happen? Did that happen up in the Northeast, or did that happen once you got to Florida?
Well, the whole New York to Florida thing is sort of like a back and forth. I'm always as people have known, I've been since 1999, back and forth every couple of years, New York, Florida, Florida, New York. It's about the people. It's about the opportunities. The industry that I was in afforded me the opportunity to, you know, somebody's always opening something in Florida, so I could kind of use that as a vehicle, and I did that a couple of times, but then I'd miss New York, so I go back to New York. But as far as the podcasting thing, I got stricken with the bug on my first cruise. I was didn't know. I didn't know anything about what I was going to experience on this cruise. All I know, I was going to be on this ship for 8 days. So I downloaded some audiobooks, and the one that had an impact on me was Gary Vee. So I listened to it was Crush It or Crush It, the first one that was like Crush It. And just listening to this guy's energy kind of amped me up. I've always kind of tried to dabble in the area of creativity a lot myself, and it just made so much sense. Like the whole thought process is being, no matter what you're into, there's an audience for you. You can, like you said, you can find your tribe. And at that point, I was like, okay, what's my tribe? What am I really into? At that point, I didn't think of creating anything cruise-wise, but I realized I loved cruising. So I'm on the ship, and I'm listening to this guy. I'm like, oh, what's going to be my thing? Boom, Yankees. And so I started this podcast called Yankees and Gravy. I did YouTube stuff as well with it. And, you know, as my love for cruising started to develop, I decided that would be my new thing. So I switched over. I pivoted from baseball to cruising, and here we are. That was about 3.5 years ago.
That's awesome. So Always Be Booked, been up and running for 3.5 years. Now, when I think of your podcast, I do feel like that you are very accurate when you talk about the news. It does seem like that you have some connections when it comes to the ins and outs of cruising. I know you're a travel agent also. How would you characterize your podcast? What kind of conversation about cruising are you putting out there? If the elevator speech, if you were meeting somebody for the first time and you wanted them to listen to your podcast, how do you describe it?
I always use it as it's a cruising podcast. It's definitely more opinion based. For good or bad, I tell it like it is pretty much. I try, or how I see it, I should say. You're going to see that my audience isn't as big as maybe a lot of the audiences out there, but it is a very loyal audience because of the fact that I just, you know, I don't really get a lot of, you know, reaching out from the cruise lines. I have fun. If I have to bash something, I will bash something. And you know what? It's nothing personal. I praise and I bash. The other thing is, I would say a lot of people were drawn to my podcast because of, I guess, maybe living vicariously through a lot of my stories. Like I said, we attacked the high seas with aggression in the beginning. And it's kind of weird because it has evolved. So there were these crazy stories. Like I do have wild stories when I first started cruising. Listen, I'm coming out of these crazy nightclubs where we just push the envelope. You know, there's a lot of shock value that we've always done. And yes, we brought it to sea a little bit. We've definitely tried to take loungers from the top deck at 12 midnight and then bring them into the nightclub and use them as our seats. I've definitely tried to move some of the stationary floor plants from the piano bar to the casino. We actually tried to move the piano from the piano bar into the casino. Now, I'll say this. A lot of that has sort of evolved into a little bit of calming down a little bit. It was just kind of coincidental that as I transitioned in my late 30s to my early 40s, it's not quite as wild. Don't get it mixed up. We still have our moments, but I think that was basically a lot of the draw to the podcast, is just like, what is this whack job going to do next on these cruises?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing, right? Like, there's so many people that are interested in cruising that come at it from so many different ways, and I do definitely appreciate that. The thing that rushes into my mind when you're telling me the story of moving the piano into the casino, did you get to know any of the security staff on any of your cruises for any of these hijinks, or do you guys have some sort of like ninja type skills to avoid detection? What did you ever get in trouble for any of that?
Yeah, a lot of it. We made a big group of friends on one of my first cruises on the Splendor. It was me and my buddy Nick, and it just happened to be during spring breakish kind of time. So there was a lot of people that were off and looking maybe of like-mindedness with us, and we just found each other. And there was a phrase that went around that ship. There was this one security guy. He was a big dude, like 6'4", 250, and you would at any time hear him screaming, "Thomas, no." And that became a catchphrase with a little crew that we would hang out with. We would go to do something. We would, I would grab that little, whatever that, there was all sorts of stuff that would happen on these cruises, and a lot of crazy stories, a lot of fun. We would test the limits a little bit, but I always tried to remain respectful. You know what I mean? If I did push the line, I would play a little dumb, completely apologize. I do have episodes where I talk about that. You know what I mean? You don't want to be overly disrespectful. We're just trying to have fun. And yes, when you are on somebody else's territory, whether it's on land, especially when it's on land, when you're under the control of another government, you want to make sure that you are respecting those rules. But we always saw nothing wrong with maybe pushing them to their limits a little bit. And yes, there was another time we went back on the security guard. We did a pier run, and we almost missed the ship in St. Thomas. And I had seen the security guard because I had seen him on another cruise. And he looked at me and he said, "You are familiar. I do understand that I have seen you from somewhere." And I'm like, it's best we don't bring it up. Now, when I did that pier run, we ran back from St. Thomas, was sprinting back. We barely made the ship. He looked at me dead in the eye and goes, "Now I know. Now I remember. Thomas, no."
The hijinks caught up with you. Let's ask that question. So, pier runners. Now, it does sound like you were pier running on purpose. Do you think pier runners are fair game for the ridicule of other cruisers, or do you think there should be a little more compassion? Now, I'm like everybody else. I've watched a ton of videos of people just completely obliterating people running the pier, but there's got to be some circumstance where you got to feel some compassion for people running the pier, or do you think it's just always the person's fault that's running the pier?
On purpose is a strong word, Tony. It's not necessarily directly on purpose. It's this. I have a catchphrase on the show. It's called "Do the Things." It's from a movie called Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. I highly recommend it. It's like, we did the things. We did the things. You know what I mean? Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't, but we did the things. And pier running is the type of thing where if you're close enough to the port, listen, people, you'll get a little heat for this, but these ships, they're going to San Juan. Where are they going? They're going to be able to make up speed. There's a time that they want you on board, and then there's a time that they're going to leave you. We operate within that little window. Okay, so if we're in Senior Frogs and we're having a good time, we're having some drinks, and you know what? It runs a little bit beyond when they actually want you back on the ship. Well, so be it. And you know what? If you got to run the pier, you run the pier. And you know what? You've done the thing. So it's not on purpose that we necessarily try to say, okay, ready, hold. Okay, now let's run. It just kind of happens. But I do wonder, the people that get so upset about it, I do wonder where that comes from, because we are not really affecting your vacation. We're not really getting in the way of you. You know what? They don't really have to make up time. They're good traveling. Usually they're not sailing at top speed when they're going from islands that are proximal to each other. So, you know what? Get your camera out, get some YouTube views, and enjoy a good pier run is my advice.
I tell you what, I'm really glad we're having this conversation. It's becoming super educational for me. I can picture Senior Frogs in San Juan, and just kudos, because that is a strategic place. I mean, it's just barely across from the cruise port. This might be a new strategy. Like, if you can understand the window of time that you have to make it back to the cruise ship before they'll leave you after the onboard time, if you can find a bar close enough, I think, man, if I ever miss a ship because of that, Tommy, I mean, I shouldn't blame it on you, but I might blame it on you. But it seems like a good strategy for sure.
Tony, we were banged up pretty good one time, and we really were about to miss the ship. We were kind of a little rough, and there was 4 of us. 2 of them went. Me and shout out to my friend Sony. We stayed back, and we kind of got leveled, and we enjoyed ourselves, and we did the things, and we heard the horn go. And we weren't sure if we were going to make it. They pulled the gangway. We told the staff at Senior Frogs, and let's be honest, I'm not here to lie to you. That's why I say we don't lie to each other on my show. The staff was every bit as inebriated as we were. I think they're just trained professionals. They're just savages at Senior Frogs. So 10 in the morning, they got to make that money. Let's get after it with the guests. So they were the same way. But then they see, wait a minute, the ship's going to leave. One says to the other one, go in the office, get the whistles. They run into the office, come out with about 6 whistles. 3 or 4 of them get under my arms, and about 2 get under her arms, and they're blowing whistles to the ship to put the gangway back out. And we made it. We made it. And then we got on the ship. We actually get on the ship in time to hear our own names announced on the PA system. But we made it to the next pier on time. We were going to St. Martin the next day. We made it there on time. No harm, no foul. And there is a rush. And I could say this, like it or not, there's a certain rush. I'm an old high school football player. I haven't heard the applause of a crowd in a very long time. When you're running that pier, it's electric. From that wall of balconies, it's electric. It really is.
All right, so anybody out there of the faint of heart, we're not saying that you should run the pier, but if you're adventurous, maybe run the pier. I like it. I don't think I can get Jenny to sign off, but I might have to try that myself someday. Sounds like cruising to the next level.
Show. Like my show, pier running is not for everybody.
Pier running is not for everybody. Well, man, what's your favorite? So we'll talk about a couple of things. You're a bit of a community builder yourself. It does seem to be for creative types, people that start to get out there. I say it unabashedly. The reason that writers write, they're to be read. The reason that singers sing is to be heard. And I believe the reason I make videos and the reason that you make podcasts is because we want people to see what we're making. And just the natural organic evolution of that is an audience will grow up around that. And then we have the opportunity to turn that audience into a community. And I know that you've been doing that. What's it like kind of community building around your podcast? And how has it been kind of making friends with strangers that you don't actually see face to face, but virtually? It doesn't feel normal to me, but it's kind of my new normal. How does it hit you?
I love it. It really has, like I said, it's the people that find my show and enjoy my show. I always say it's an acquired taste. And I've gotten so many emails saying, you know what? I agree with that so much. I couldn't stand your show when I first listened to it. And then I think that's the thing. Like what they'll tell you is familiarity breeds, I guess, unity. And you've done group cruises. You've done several, and you do a great job with those group cruises. I've only done one, and I was nervous about it. I don't know how you felt about your first one, but
100%,
when we first got together, this group cruise, about 20 people, it could not have went any better. There are some challenges with it. You have crazy personalities from all over the place with different ideologies and different backgrounds. So there is a little bit of a trickiness when it comes to monitoring things, which I know you can probably speak to at length about. Yeah, and maybe I'd ask you the same thing. How do you, what is your strategy on that? But in general, it's been really rewarding. The support, good, solid advice I've gotten from some of the people who've, the directions I've taken my show in and any of my platforms have been directly as a result of the advice that I've gotten from some of my listeners. So I've thought it to be great. I think you're right. I've seen you say before too, you can't necessarily put all your eggs in that friendship basket. You do have to keep a certain level of arm's length when it comes to it. But if you're doing all those things, it's one of the more rewarding things of my life, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and when it comes to group cruises, 100% I get nervous every time. We've done maybe 3 now or 4 now. And for me, I just feel honored that anybody would want to get on a cruise ship because of something I've done. And so I feel like a lot of pressure, but not in a bad way, just to make sure that those people have a good time. And like you said, it's interesting because you are kind of managing the expectations of a lot of diverse people that you've never met before. And those have been some of the most rewarding experiences that I've had. I've had some great times on group cruises, but it's a challenge. Like, you know, as your audience grows, you do have interactions with a lot of people that you don't get to see face to face. And I really like the group cruise because I really do feel like then I'm actually making that connection, and it's easier to look in somebody's eyes and kind of make that friendship bond opposed to just a picture on a, you know, social media platform or somebody sliding into your DMs. You're like, I don't know who this is. I'm very wary like that. I'm a very stranger danger kind of person. I'm a little bit of an introvert. And so it's really weird when all of a sudden, you know, 50 people that you don't know are hitting you up, telling you about life, and you're like, well, I don't really know you, you know? And so I really like the group cruise because it's a lot easier to make those connections. And I've made some real genuine friends out of these group cruises. And like you said, people that now you value their advice, like because you know where they're coming from, you know who they are. And yeah, I definitely can relate to that idea that now you have a good, like there are times when I'm like, oh, I want to try something, that I'll reach out to those people that I know now and ask them the question, or you got a Patreon, we got a Patreon. And, you know, these are people that, you know, even though you might not know all of them, at least you feel like they're committed to the cause and you don't mind asking them, hey, I want to try this. What do you think? And so it's really cool to have that community kind of built up around it. Now, are group cruises, is that the main way you're going with your cruises now? Or do you have a crew of people that you like to cruise with outside of the group cruise? I guess what I'm asking, so I primarily cruise with Jenny. Sometimes we drag some family along, and then every once in a while we have the big group cruise. But for us, most of the time cruising is just Jenny and I going cruising. What's your cruising experience like? Is it usually just like you and a friend, or you and a larger group? How do you normally do it these days?
I would say I have probably of their friends, and I have a pool of about 12 to 15 of them that at any given time, anywhere from 4 to 6 of them will come on. You know what I mean? They're not all available for all of them. You know, it's different times, but I'll be like, you know what? I'll throw it out there. Who can come on this one? Who can come on that one? We had a nice crew of about 6 of us that I'm actually friends with that were able, you know, in real life, that came on this last group cruise. And that's one thing I was nervous about too. You know what I mean? How are your like longtime, lifelong friends going to interact with people who listen to your show? And man, it really, really went well. I don't know if I got lucky. I don't know if it's always going to be like that, but it really, really just went well. I was going to ask you, you just mentioned feeling that pressure when you're on and making sure everybody feels like they're having fun. Did you ever have any of those moments on any of your group cruises where you were like, we got to switch something up here. I got to fix this. This is not going well right now.
So the way we do our group cruise is pretty loose, right? So we'll make a couple, what I call connection points. We usually have a meetup, and we'll have some, you know, I'm completely bought into giving away trophies. I like that aspect of it. So we'll have some like putt-putt competition, some cornhole. And then like when we go on Halloween, we'll usually have our own little costume party. But if you're thinking like a 7-day cruise, we might have 4 to 5 connection points that are like official meetups. But then everything else is about, hey, we're going to be here, we're going to be there. If you want to get together, let's get together. And then the big thing for us is like the pre-cruise meetup. We'll usually have a dinner the night before and try to get to meet everybody. And so I guess the way that I gauge it is, it's really weird. Like we've had people come on the group cruise that just come to the meetup, and then they don't come to anything else, and you don't see them any other time. And of course you're questioning like, well, do they not like us? Like, but the cool thing in the way that we say it is like, you know, it's your cruise, right? You don't have to do any of these things. And I've not met anybody yet, and I would hope everybody would be honest, but I just kind of read the room. I'll say, hey, you know, like if I catch up with somebody, are you feeling it? Are you having a good time? Are you making friends? And we really try to promote each other, you know, people making friends with each other. And it's interesting, off of our group cruises, we met and we have friends, but the friendships that have formed with other people on those group cruises, they're really kind of special to watch, because now we have people that we'll see go off and cruise together that they met on the group cruise. And so, you know, again, I like to check in with everybody, make sure everybody's doing okay. Haven't had any complaints. And I just make myself as available as possible. I get probably the least amount of sleep on a group cruise than any other cruise, but I'll be up throwing dice till 3 in the morning, hanging out in the casino, looking for the casino people. And I'll be up at, 6 in the morning, grabbing brunch with people. So for me, it's like, just be available. Just realize that these people came to hang out, and try to give them as good a time as possible. And so far it's worked out, but yeah, I worry about that. Like, I don't want somebody to come away from it going, oh, that was not a great time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just can think back to the one that I had. It was a home run the whole time. And yeah, of course, you're going to have, peaks, and, it's going to level off at certain times. But I just remember there was one instance in San Juan where it was hot. We were at Barachina's, and the service was terrible. There wasn't enough seats. And I'd be like, this is where I'm going. Meet us at Barachina's, the birthplace of the pina colada. It's going to be great. And then everybody did show up. And there was just that one moment where this place was obviously not what it was the last time I got there. And it was like a little bit of a stand-around thing where it was a little discomfort. And everybody was kind of looking at me like, all right, what are we doing? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to relax. We're going to see what we can do. But, that lasted probably about 2 or 3 hours, and then everybody regrouped at this other bar. We watched the sunset, and it was right back on track. So I guess you're just going to have to understand that it's not going to be at 10 on 10 the whole time. And like you said, everybody in your group just chooses their own involvement is probably the best way you could say it, right?
Yeah, and I've seen other examples of where everything is like planned down to the minute. That doesn't really match my personality. And so the other thing that I want to make sure is when people come cruise with us, they get what they see, right? Like, I try to be as authentic as possible, from what you see. It's so weird, and you know it too from the podcast. You share so much of your own experience that when people come up to you, they know everything about you, and you don't know anything about them. And so you have to go through this process of like, okay, they're like, oh yeah, I know that about, like, things that you would normally say in conversation, like, oh, I did this, or like, oh yeah, we already know that because you said that on a video or something like that. And so it's a weird interaction, but again, it's like, I think people are just happy to be there. I think what I've seen from people that are taking group cruises, the group cruise aspect is like a bonus. Like, they're cruising anyways, and now they have this bonus where there's some connection points with people that they want to hang out with. And then we try to bookend it. We have that meetup at the beginning, and then we kind of have a little farewell at the end, a little touch point where we can make sure everybody's okay. And it's been a blast so far. I really love the group cruises.
Yeah, no, definitely, me too. And with me, it's a lot of like the style of cruising we do. Like I said, it's a little bit excessive with the revelry. I don't like when I'm on land. I don't really get after it anymore like I used to when I was mixing it up in the bars and stuff like that. But every once in a while. But when I'm on a cruise, I pretty much am dedicated to those good, 5, 6 of those, whatever, 8 days of kind of really going hard. And I noticed that a lot of people joined me on my group cruise knowing that about me and just kind of wanting to watch it. You know what I mean? Just kind of wanting to see it and maybe live a little vicariously through it, whether they participate at that level or not. Not always, but they like just being a part of it and kind of like observing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So if you ask me what I like best about cruising, I like good food, I like good entertainment, and I like the casino. So if you had to pull out 2 or 3 things that were your favorite aspects of cruising, what kind of cruiser are you that way? Good question. Good question. I would have to say definitely the advent of the drink package has changed my life. Definitely. I do enjoy the sea. I am one of those people that you will find just like going up to the railings, just kind of hanging out and just appreciating and taking in the sea, that part of it. I do love the fact that, there's different venues on a cruise ship, but they're all open to you at any point. You take your plate from here, your drink from there. You can go from this place to that place. You can get a, you can get a plate from the buffet, but then somebody wants pizza. You go down to Sorrento's, you bring your plate. I just love the freedom that you have of cruising to be able to come and go as you please and just be as you are, period. Yeah, no, to me, that's the best. I mean, you can be in the middle of a party or you could be isolated, like you said, staring at the sea. there's so many aspects of the cruise life that really draw me to it, and just the variety of the things that you can do is one of it. So with that in mind, do you have a favorite cruise line, favorite cruise ship?
I stopped short of calling it a favorite cruise line. You know what I mean? I stopped short of saying I have a favorite cruise line, because when people say, what's the best cruise line? I could say, you know what? If you show me any cruise line, I could show you a ship on another cruise line that's better than a ship on that cruise line. So to me, it's by ship, it's by class of ships. And I always kind of say, all right, I establish what cruise I'm going on, and it is an X-driven cruise. You know what? This is a type of cruise where I don't give a crap what the itinerary is, what the ship is, but I have these 11 people going with me, and that's all I care about. There's another one where there's a new ship that's out there that I want to try. It's going to, Freeport or whatever, or, somewhere that people aren't necessarily looking at as the most exotic destinations. But I'm like, you know what? This is a ship-driven itinerary. This is a ship-driven cruise. Then there's some Southern Caribbean, things going to Aruba, Bonaire, wherever, and this is an itinerary-driven cruise. So I try to really, really stop short of saying that I have a favorite cruise line. Now, right now, I am kind of jonesing for a Carnival cruise. I can tell you that. I've come off maybe 3 out of 4 of my last cruises with Royal Caribbean, which I love, but I want to get back into that Carnival feel, the cruise director having that huge presence, that, I guess, choice that you have of all the complimentary brand name food options, the aft pool, so I'm finding myself in a little bit of a Carnival mode right now, but I enjoy that about, the way I cruise, in that I'm not loyal to any one brand. These loyalty programs are very, very nice. The perks are very, very nice, but there's nothing on that list whatsoever that would make me cruise one class of cruise ships or cruise line over another based on the list of deliverables that they give you on those. So I don't have a favorite cruise line at this point. I can't say I do.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think I line up fairly similar to you on these perks. If you do so here's the thing that I'm big about. You hear a lot of people, my favorite negative thing about the cruising space, cruising on social media, it's amazing to me how the level of negativity that exists out there. And the interesting thing, so there's negativity, and then there's brand loyalty. And what's wild to me is that people will complain about a brand, right? So you went through this whole thing a few months ago where I don't even know what the top level is, the diamond, the platinum, whatever. They didn't like the free gift they were getting on Carnival. They were all in an uproar. I don't like this gift, blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, well, why don't you take your dollars and let Carnival know that you don't like it by putting your dollars with Royal Caribbean? And they're like, well, no, I'm not going to do standard, talking with my dollars. I'm just going to complain about it. And when it comes to that perk package, I'm with you, man. Like, the fact that you'd have to spend thousands of dollars to get something that you could pay $30 for during your week of cruising, it just doesn't appeal to me. But I'm wired differently that way. And to me, I kind of like, look, I'm very dedicated to my lady. But the cool thing about cruising is that you can play the field. If you see a nice aft over here and a nice aft over there, and one of them doesn't match up with your preferred cruise line, there's nothing stopping you from trying out the other cruise ship. And I like that aspect of it because, for example, I did a lot of Carnival cruises all at once. I really enjoy Carnival. But, when you do 2 or 3 Carnival ships in a row, they're doing the same main theater show. And if you're a fan of the main theater show, you're like, okay, well, this was good once, but now my cruising experience is degraded because I'm just seeing the same main theater show. And so the cool thing, at least for me with the cruising space, is the variety of product that you can try out. And I'm a little bit like you. People say, what's your favorite cruise line or cruise ship? And I'm like, well, what's the next one I'm on? Because that's my favorite one right now until I go on another one,
Exactly. Tony, one of my favorite and first ever exposures to you was this video that you put together. I don't know if you know what I'm going to say or not right now, but I didn't even know who you were. I shared it in my group. And I'm going to tell you something. When you did that satire or sarcastic little rant about all the things that people judge you for that you like to do when you're on a cruise ship. Like, why would I go in a pool on a cruise? I have a pool at home. Why would I? And I hear people judging the way people go on cruises. You're going to watch a football game on a cruise? You can watch football game. Yeah, okay, I like the things I like, but now I get to do it with the backdrop of this beautiful, moving piece of, engineering wonderment. So, like, why would anybody? That's one of my rules. I don't have a lot of rules, but I say, don't ever try to predict your cruise. Don't ever try to tell somebody how to cruise. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, I know the video that you're talking about. It was completely a response to what I saw on social media. I think the thing that teed me off is I was in one of these larger Facebook groups, and hey, my son, he really needs to play this game to stay calm. How's the Wi-Fi on X ship or whatever? And maybe one helpful answer, oh, the Wi-Fi is okay. Like, I hate where people don't respond to the original question and they just go off on some tangent. Maybe one person out of 50 said, oh, yeah, the Wi-Fi on that ship is okay. And the other 50 comments were like, why would you let your kid play a video game on a cruise ship? And I'm like, that wasn't the question. And who cares why this, she wants to pay the money. Her simple question is, does it work? And the wild thing is you see that over and over. So, yeah, that video was a response to, like, why would you do that when you could do it at home? Well, basically everything you can do on a cruise ship, you can do at home. And, to your point, I don't understand why people like to poop on other people's vacations, which I guess it's human nature, but, yeah, so I'd love to poke fun at that. So I appreciate that you calling that out. I do appreciate that. I do have a couple favorite Always Be Book stories, and I don't know the number of the episodes, but one of the first things I remember connecting with you about was this conspiracy theory that Carnival Cruise Lines purposefully does not provide enough pizza to discourage people from going to late night pizza. And the interesting thing to me is it was probably a month or two before I heard that. I was on a group cruise, and we took a group of people about 1 o'clock in the morning to the Pizza Pirate, and we walked up and there was a huge line, and we immediately said we're not going to have pizza. And then when I'm listening to that, I'm like, I had that exact experience. I'm pretty sure that they don't do that. And then my other favorite story was when you were reviewing the Bahamas Paradise cruise, and you magnificently described walking around with what seems like a fifth of alcohol in some sort of gym shorts, walking from place to place, drinking out of a bottle. And I thought, wow, now this would have been a scene. The Bahamas Paradise, that's the question everybody has. Like, is this a high-end cruise or is this super cheap? And I'm like, there's Tommy walking around with the gym shorts and some vodka. And I'm like, that had to be a scene. Those are two things that really stick out. But I do believe the pizza thing for sure.
Okay, first on the pizza thing. Now, you were close, but I don't claim that they run out of product. I don't claim that they are going to not have enough pizza and they're going to try to run out and say, oh, well. All I'm claiming is that you're not going to tell me that they don't operate at a pace that is less than their full potential. They could be banging out those pizzas left and right. They could be sliding them in the oven, sliding them out, banging them out, pre-making them, having them to go. No, they operate slow. And I'm not going to say, if you're going to wait, if you're willing to wait, you're good. You can get your pizza. But they know psychologically that if they keep that little bit of a line and they operate at the pace that they're going at, that means handling every customer one by one. Hello, sir. How are you? What could I get you? I'd like mushroom and cheese, whatever. Then they will start the process of making that. There's only 4 different types of pizzas that they have available. They could be pre-making them and banging them out and get rid of that line. But that would mean that more people would show up and they'd go through more product. I firmly believe that. You want to call that conspiracy? Sounds like you're a little on the same page. Who knows? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely. And that's the conversation I've had. The cool thing about free included food is that it's free included food, and you know it as well as anybody. People will probably take more than they need if it's available, and that's what I think happens with the pizza. If all of a sudden they got 20 pepperoni pies up there, all those pies are going to go. And so, yeah, I do think it's a strategy to not give away too much food. And, it is what it is. You do have to wait for the pizza, and I think the pizza's fine. But, it all comes at the same time where you see they're trying to control costs by all of a sudden room service is not free 24 hours a day. I give it to Carnival. I think they have the best free, like the best included food options. If you think about the Guy's Burger, the Blue Iguana, if you think about the pizza, if you think about the deli, they have a variety that I think is hard to match with anybody else. But at the same time, they've got to be thinking that, you know, we can't just, you know, people are going to abuse the heck out of it. And so I'm sure there's some sort of formula like don't make too many pizzas ahead. I'm just speculating. I don't know if that's the way, but I don't think that they're there purposefully not making enough pizza. I do think it's just I think it's a tempo thing for sure.
Right. And then the other thing you touched on, listen, it's not lost on me. That's not my proudest moment on the, you know, the solo Thanksgiving cruise I took where I purchased a bottle of, you know, what did I get? I believe it was some sort of vodka. I believe it was Stoli or something, Smirnoff, Sky, whatever. But that's how they present it to you. You know what I mean? They just give you the full bottle package and they hand you a bottle. And that's it. That's your bottle. So, like, you can either go back to your room and fill yourself up a drink and then come back out and do whatever you want to do. Or, you know, despite the fact that it definitely, the optics aren't good on it, yeah, you can slide the bottle into your cargo shorts and walk around the ship with it. Which, yeah, you know, if I'm looking at that from the outside in, I'm like, yeah, that's not the best look, but you know, it is what it is.
Man, I came away from that story just with the reassurance that the cruise life really is anything that you want to make it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing to me about the cruise is that I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're telling. And then my favorite part of that story was like that ended up in some lounge with a Tina Turner singer that didn't have a backing band or something. I mean, I just want to go on the Bahamas Paradise just to experience this because it sounds like
and you
it sounds like a trip. Yeah. But no.
And the Clarence Clemens style saxophone player that was blowing people out of the front row with just one singer, and then this guy would come in like he was literally in Madison Square Garden, blaring saxophone. I mean, people's hairs were going back, and it was just like there was like 7 people in there. It was really, I'm sitting there solo, and it was real entertainment. Not for the reason they wanted it to be, but it was real entertainment.
And the cool thing is, at the end of the day, like you said, solo on Thanksgiving, and it gave you exactly what you wanted. You had a good cruise, right?
Yep, definitely. You know what I always agree with you said too. Another part of not that we're going back and forth and, you know, just kissing each other's asses here, but when you talked about your tipping situation, when you made that video, I was like, that really hit a chord with me. Like, you are really confusing the crap out of everybody with your tipping policies. And I like the way you put it when you were like, how dare you make me feel like I don't have to tip, but you should feel bad if you don't. 100%. Make the tipping policy clear. Put it out there. I mean, I'm not going to remove gratuities. I'm not going to do it. But then at the same time, don't start making me feel bad if I don't fill this envelope up or if I don't give this guy an envelope. Like, what are we doing here? Just tell me what I got to tip and I'll do it.
Look, so, you know, back in the 90s, I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. I worked at, it's called the Gaylord Hotel now. It used to be the Opryland Hotel. I worked in fine dining. Every bit of money I made came off of tips, right? Like I was a front waiter. I served cocktails. This is the way I got paid. I believe in paying it forward and paying homage to the tipping gods. I over-tip everywhere that I go. But the tipping doesn't bother me. It's the manipulation. Just like you said, it's like, all right, the cruise line comes out and says, look, we've taken care of tipping for you. Just pay your assigned gratuities, and now you don't have to worry about it. It's worded like that. We've made it easy for you. But then you get on the cruise ship, and everybody's got their hand out. And again, I'm happy to pay anybody anything, but just make it clear to me. I know, like, I get on that soapbox way too much, but I get frustrated because there's people out there that are hardcore. I'm removing my gratuities, and I feel like when people remove gratuities, you're shorting somebody. Now, not everybody believes that, but I do believe they use the prepaid gratuities or the assigned gratuities to pay people, and then when you don't, you know, when you remove your gratuities, I believe that you're shorting people, and I don't think you should short people. But at the same time, I don't believe I should double pay. And this is the weirdest thing about cruising. It's probably my biggest beef with cruising other than towel animals. It's my biggest beef about cruising that this is the only place where now I'm all of a sudden like some sort of labor moderator. Like I'm trying to make sure everybody gets paid correctly. And I'm like, I don't think I signed up for that. I just wanted to go eat a burger, you know? It's so crazy.
yeah, you have to like invest. Okay, well, this money goes to this person, but then not necessarily. Only if the reviews are on par. I don't want. I definitely don't want to get into a cruise bashing session, because clearly we both create content about cruising, and we have an over the top passion as a whole for cruising. But I guess, you know, during these times, you know, we're breaking it down. We're talking about the good. We're talking about the bad, and I think neither one of us are apologists for the industry. So I think it's just stream of conscious, just talking. But I do agree with you 100%. Make it clear, you know, let us know what we're doing, and hopefully we don't have to be worried about making sure that, you know, these people from third world countries aren't being compensated properly for their hard work, which I do like to do sometimes too, as a whack job. You know, you mentioned, and I don't understand in these Facebook groups or whatever, you know, I don't have a problem if somebody has a complaint and they voice it. When somebody complains about something, you can get your popcorn out and realize that there's going to be 15 people that are like, well, maybe you don't know how to have a good time. You don't know how to have a good time. You don't know how to. So I think it's crazy. And I'm not going to lie. I've gone into groups and been like, you know what? Why am I tipping on a cruise ship? Do these people really even work very hard? I mean, it's not like I'm totally kidding around. I'm totally making a joke, and some people realize it, but it's just like I like these little Andy Kaufman style social experiments every once in a while. Like, just get hold of yourself, okay? I think something about things that are written, like you could have the same conversation with somebody and talk about your opinion, and the exchange is very, very professional. It's very, very respectful. But something about seeing it written in words on a post makes people lose their minds. And now I got to weigh in, and then it becomes personal. It's so silly.
Yeah, and to echo what you said there, it's I'm going to tell everybody who's never been on a cruise to go on a cruise. I love it. And but I do think it's important, and I'll catch a lot of grief, right? Like, I'll make a sarcastic video, or I'll challenge tipping, and people are like, oh, thanks, I didn't want to go on a cruise, and now I don't want to go on a cruise. But at the same time, you know, how disingenuous would people find us if we were all like, you know, cruising's like rainbows and everybody gets a free puppy and cotton candy. Like, nothing in life is like that. And so, you know, it's so weird. Like, right now, in this day and age, the cruise haters are coming out of the woodwork. I'm sure you've seen it. Anybody that's ever had a beef with the cruise industry, they're having a field day right now. But it's interesting, like that, and that's something I pride myself on. You know, I'm not I try not to bash the cruise lines at all, but at the same time, I try to call it out when I see it, just because I want people that are listening to us to at least know that I'm not. I don't care. Like, I don't care if people say, oh, you're selling out to the cruise line or something like that. It's like, no, I'm just trying to be me, man. And if you connect with that, that's good. And if not, you know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So I get that too. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not really looking just to bash cruise lines, but if I did have something on my list, taking care of the way they do tipping would be one of them, for sure. For sure.
Definitely. Totally agree.
Let's talk about it, man. We've been talking for a while now, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the virus in the globe.
Me?
Man, what's going on, man? All right, so you work at a bar there in Boca, right?
Well, I did. The bar's not really. They're doing takeout right now. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. So they're still
doing takeout. I mean, you're not paying your bills with takeout. Is it lessening the blow? Maybe elongating the time you could stay open for it all? Yeah, it's helping out, but yeah, it's not an ideal situation.
So what are you doing with your time? What do you do? What do you do at the bar there? Do you book entertainment, or you DJ there? What do you do for
I'm just a manager. My experience in the industry is basically with one company, but it's extensive. I've had my own locations. I've had supervisor roles where 4 or 5 general managers are reporting to me, and I've just built up a good amount of equity within that company. That company, to me, has been I'd have to say, my professional home, and where I've learned everything. So I'm so grateful, but I did at one point feel it was time to move on and try something else for both geographic reasons, but also professional reasons. And I also wanted to see if I could take a run at this cruise stuff and see if, you know, there was a possibility for it to be a viable, livable, income generating, you know, prospect for me. And it's starting to show signs of that. lately I've been in the mix of thinking maybe combine the two, possibly opening my own place and maybe kind of making it a little bit of a nautical cruise theme and kind of make sure it's near a cruise port. So that's pretty much my background as far as anything non-cruise related.
So with the pandemic going on, so are you still working in your capacity there?
No, the restaurant is in play, but it's takeout only, so it's not really anything for me to do there. I was a floor manager, so they're chugging along, and I'm hoping for the best. Hoping for the best soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a crazy time, you know. At least we're doing YouTube full time. All that dynamics changed, and so, like a lot of other people in the country, we're just doing our best, right? It's a scary time because people are getting sick, people are dying, and you know, money, those kind of things, even though they're challenging, is more manageable than people getting sick. So I hope what we're doing is helping out the process. I'll be glad when it all opens back up for sure, but I'm hoping that for sure. I did a video the other day. Let me get your opinion on this. Trying not to get too controversial, but I did a video the other day, and a lot of times when I talk about what's going on in the world, you hear an interesting amount of the blame game being played when it comes to people stuck on cruise ships. So this is the conversation. People that are stuck on cruise ships after, say, March the 15th. Is it the government's fault? Is it the cruise line's fault? Is it the person on the cruise ship's fault? Or is it just bad luck? I'm sure you've thought about some of these things. What do you think about these people that went cruising late, got stuck on the cruise ship and got sick? Could that have been prevented? And where do you see who could have been the people that prevented that, in your opinion?
I don't know if this will come off as like kind of like you know, laying it up at all, but my real true opinion on this is that it's not anybody's fault necessarily, because this is not something we've gone through before. You know, maybe some people took a little bit of an extra risk that they shouldn't have. Maybe the government possibly maybe didn't react as sharply as they should have. I don't think it's productive. Now, when this is all done, let's draw up the report. Let's figure out, just for reconnaissance purposes, let's figure out who did wrong, what, when, and where. But for right now, to have any of the discussion be about anything but how do we fix it? What do we do next time something like this happens? That's it. Let's just get past the problem and put it in the rear view, and then not for purposes of blaming each other, but then after this is all done, let's put a committee together. Let's figure out what was done wrong, but honestly, not to be like a gotcha, but to be like just for purposes of not repeating the same mistake twice. That's all I really feel about it.
Yeah, I think it's sage advice. Sometimes I like to push the buttons just to reveal how crazy it is. So much of this, I watched some congressional hearings early on in this process where they had medical experts that were trying to give out information about what could happen. This was still early days. And it just turned into this like political slugfest. Like, my guy's great. No, your guy's not great. And we never really heard from the experts. So I'm with you. Sometimes I'll poke the bear just to turn the mirror on people and say, look, why are we spending all this time trying to figure out who to blame? Why don't we figure out how to solve the problem first? So I couldn't catch you with that one, Tommy. Good sage advice there.
You know what I'm saying? I wasn't trying to avoid it either. It's just like it becomes a thing where you ever get into that thing where, you know, we'll show you sources. You know, you have an opinion, I have an opinion. We're throwing articles back and forth to each other. At the end of the day, if you want to find something out there that fits your narrative, you can. We're going back to Cruise Wars here. You know what I mean? You can find your narrative somewhere, and if you choose to live in that vacuum and not use critical thinking, you can absolutely hit somebody with a bunch of facts that they may or may not be able to come back at you with. I like to step back, use common sense, and you know what? We're all going to have different ideology that we bring to the table based on our backgrounds. But the minute it becomes uncivil is where I just step back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not productive, and in a time of crisis, even not in a time of crisis, I'm rather looking for productivity than just like, it's so funny, like, especially, I mean, if you've been in any kind of long-term relationship, you can be right but not be right at the same time. Like, sometimes being right Doesn't really matter. And to me, this is one of those situations like, all right, fine. Let's just say it was so-and-so's fault. What are we going to do now? Like, do you get a prize because you were right? Or is there still people in the hurt locker because of the challenges that are going on that we haven't helped out just because you're like, I still get comments on our YouTube videos like, you know, the flu and car accidents and BB guns kill more people than this virus. Well, who cares? Like, they're real people that, like, is it going to be valid as soon as enough people die? Then it's like, oh, I guess this means something. Like, why do we want that death toll to be higher than the flu for it to mean anything? And
that was the original narrative. The original narrative was H1N1, the swine flu, killed 12,000 Americans. Well, look where we are right now. Are we where we need to be? Where you think it's serious yet? But I'm just like, you know, it's like what I saw, and this is not political. I'm not getting political, but what I saw yesterday on that update, that press conference, where pick a side, both of them are arguing over who did what and who did it the right way first. The American people, the world, does not want to see that. The world wants to see, when is this going to be behind us? What are the numbers you need to see to make sure that we are going to go in the right direction? I don't want to see a slugfest. I don't want to see a blame. I don't care about February right now. I care about April, May, June. Let's get to where we need to be. And you know what? If you have to feel like you got to fight it out later, do it after it's all said and done.
No, well said. I believe in that. Well, transition a little bit to maybe what cruising is going to look like after this epidemic. I'm sure you've thought about it. You know, like last week, Genting, the Asian cruise line Genting, they released their new healthcare protocols, maybe signaling that there could be cruising in the future in Asia. Again, who knows when that's going to happen, really no timetables, but the fact that they're thinking about what cruising is going to look like going forward. Their health protocols on embarkation included a more detailed health questionnaire. They included a temperature scan. And then on the cruise ship, the things like no more self-serve buffet, increased cleaning. Do you think, what do you think cruising is going to look like when we come out of this epidemic? What are some things that you think we'll see at the cruise ports when we go to get on a cruise ship, and what would you like to see?
Well, the thing is this. It's a couple of different ways you can go with that. I really, in my heart, still believe that we will pretty much go back to the way things were. I think this is all hot and heavy right now. I truly believe, and I totally realize I'm not going to, die on the hill for it. But if you're going to put a gun to my head, I do believe that we will go back the way it was, with some exceptions. Like you said, I don't think you'll be able to grab your own tongs anymore and serve yourself at the buffets. I don't think I do think there will be checks. But let's just put it like this. If there's a vaccine, then all bets are off. Everybody's going to cruise and it won't be a thing. What everybody's freaked out about, and rightly so, 100% rightly so, is the mortality rate of this thing. You know what I mean? If it's a flu, it's a flu. If there's a flu, nobody wants to get the flu, but you can get over it. It's not going to be something that's going to deter you. So if they can fix that, if they can fix it so that people aren't necessarily dying, cruising will go back to normal as is. Now, apart from that, I still think it's pretty good chance within a couple of months they'll add some things into play and it will be pretty much where it was. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. The question I have, the most interesting part of it that I saw and what I'm struggling with, is the whole 70 and over doctor's note fit to sail thing. Right. That's going to affect the industry a lot. If they're going to hold to that, that'll be a game changer.
Yeah, and I've seen some pushback on that, and I've done a little bit of video about that, and I've had multiple people that are 70 years of older saying, this is age discrimination, that kind of thing. And then I actually got feedback from a doctor today that said, there's no way I'm going to be giving out fit to sail notes. Like, why am I going to be on the hook for that? I think this is going to be a real challenge when you're saying that people have to have a fit to sail letter from a doctor, because there's really no guidance, at least so far, about what that means. And so is that the cruise line just saying, okay, well, as long as a doctor said you're fit to sail, that's on the doctor? I can't think of any doctor that would do that. I think
right. And as it is now, it's not the most pleasant thing to discuss, but as it is right now, I think there is, and I've had cruise ship employees tell me this, that, there are deaths at sea and they're not always discussed, and they happen more often than people think or want to think. But in many ways, you have people who are elderly, who are maybe widowed, who maybe not in the best condition, and they've kind of negotiated that with themselves, that, I'm going to go out to sea, and if something happens on a cruise ship, I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm leaving this earth doing what I love to do. And they kind of have already kind of resigned to that. Now, do they? Not always, of course not. But now those people, that's going to be taken away from them. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think it needs to be not necessarily are you fit to sail, because is that what really the issue is? Or is it the level of contagion, right? The level of, I guess, spreadability of what the virus is. So if you have someone who has a bad heart, or they're suffering from the late stages of cancer or whatever it is that really what you're looking for? Aren't you really looking for them not having an infectious disease and being at risk to spread it to other people? That should really be the concern, right? That's what's really what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, I would agree. So, the things that you talked about the virus, a high mortality rate, and then a very easy spreadable virus. And so this is an interesting concept to me. I listened yesterday to the CEO, Arnold Donald of Carnival Corporation, and, he made a great point. He's like, the reason there was coronavirus on the cruise ship is because somebody brought coronavirus on the cruise ship. So there's a couple elements here. First of all, if the virus ends up on the cruise ship, you have to figure out how to contain the spread. So a lot of cruise lines are going to be implementing more protocols around isolation, early detection, that kind of thing. But I think the real challenge for cruise lines are how are you going to keep the virus off of the cruise line? And, I've talked about it before a little bit, like once they get to where you can have a 5-minute test, does that become part of embarkation, or is that just too intrusive and too, cost prohibitive? But I think at the end of the day, to keep people's confidence as high, and the wild things, I really feel like the cruise lines, they got hammered just because they're so visible. They're required to report. But if you look at the cruise lines, the percentage of cruise ships that ended up with cases on it, very minimal. And again, statistically out of the whole fleet. But the fact that the cruise lines do have to report that there's such high visibility, I think that they got a little more attention. And again, I think there's a group of people out there that are just wanting to bag on cruise lines. But to me, this is the thing that I don't really know the answer for. How do you prevent people who have the virus, where this virus travels with, asymptomatic people that don't look like they're sick? How do you keep that person from getting on the cruise ship? To me, that's going to be the biggest hurdle to overcome, because temperature scan's not going to do it. Asking people if they've been sick, I guess contact tracing. Have you come in contact with anybody that's been sick? But I think, I don't know. I put a poll out there today. Does there need to be a vaccine in place before cruising resumes? The majority of people in the Facebook group say no, but it's almost neck and neck in the YouTube community. And again, the YouTube community has a lot of people that are anti-cruising. So I could see that. But even then, you can't force everybody to take the vaccine. So it does come back to me, what do you put in place to know if you're letting somebody on the cruise ship that has the virus? I don't know how to solve that. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, it's true. It's very, very divided. I didn't put the poll out, but I've asked people, and there are people that would cruise today. If you allowed them to cruise today, they would get on cruise ships today. And you know what? Am I that person? Maybe not. I'd have some questions first, probably. But then there are people just today. I saw somebody write that forget about cruising as we know it until there's a vaccine. And that's the far other extreme. So
right.
I do think it's somewhere in the middle. I think, the thing that probably bothers me a little bit mostly is that you're not seeing parameters. Like right now, clearly it's an economic thing. We have to get back to work. The country has to move forward. You have that faction of people, and the other people saying, at what cost? You know what? I don't care. My grandparents aren't with. So clearly there's something in the middle that has to be arrived at. I would just wish that there were some more data on what we're looking for us to get back to normal. What are these numbers that we have to see? What are you looking for? How many hospital admittance? How many ICU patients? How many for lack of a better term, deaths do we have to get down to see for us to be able to start getting back to normal? And yeah, and I don't mean to punt on this either, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. If you're going to ask me, I'm going to say cruising will be back within 3 months, 75% of what it was. That's kind of what I think. And again, I'm not 100% on that. I'm not pounding the desk when I say that. I'm saying if I'm going to be pushed for an answer, that's what I'm going to think. That's what I'm going to think, just because based on, I do think there is a level of resiliency that we have that is sometimes underestimated.
No, I agree. And I think part of it will be just seeing what happens, right? Like, I don't think that you'll never have a cruise ship again that doesn't have a virus outbreak on it. I mean, it's just not possible unless this thing is completely eradicated, which nobody's saying that it will be. Cruising will have to start back up with the idea that they will have to deal with an outbreak. And to me, that's one of the challenges during this period. The cruise companies aren't American. That's been an interesting discussion during this. We know that the major cruise lines are incorporated in other countries. We know that they flag their ships in other countries, and they don't necessarily pay United States taxes. They don't necessarily follow labor laws, and that's a business decision that they made. They're happy to say that they're global companies, and of course, a large amount of their consumers are United States consumers. But what you see in some of the CDC language, some of the Coast Guard language, is they're using that. Even in the you can't have any of the stimulus language, they're using what the cruise lines have used as a good business decision for them against them. And so going forward, I think the CDC, the Coast Guard, they've taken a hard stance that basically says if you have a problem on a cruise ship, it's not a United States problem, it's a cruise ship problem. And so I don't believe we're going to get away from having outbreaks on cruise ships, but I do think it's going to look drastically different. When we were cruising last year, if there was a medical emergency, you could almost bet that the Coast Guard would come get that person. I think one thing that's going to change is that's not going to be the case going forward. And I don't know how that's going to affect the cruise line or cruise costs, because once all the costs fall on the cruise line to take care of all of those medical emergencies, I think you could see an increase in prices. Have you seen some of that in your community where people are like, bagging on the cruise line because they're not an American company per se?
It's an interesting thing that you just said. I hadn't thought of the medevac situations and where the cost gets pushed over to as far as cruise lines having to deal with that directly. That's an interesting thought, and something I definitely am going to look into a little bit more. But as far as that's the knee-jerk response, and it's not as much of a response from people who are avid cruisers, like the people who are in a group, but people who kind of have that more of a peripheral look on things. That's the first thing they go to. Well, they try to avoid the taxes based on the fact that they have their ships flagged in other countries. And that's true. And that's clearly a notch against them. However, you have to keep everything in perspective and realize that that is basically a decision of a big corporation looking to circumvent and save some money, which every single day major corporations look to do. They look to get breaks around every corner. They don't have that opportunity like the cruise ships do. Chances are, if they did have that opportunity, they would exercise that right too and take advantage of that as well. But then on the other side of it, please do not discount the economic factor, the economic impact that the cruising industry has towards the U.S. economy. When you're talking about the airfare that it takes to get there, when you talk about port cities and how much the local community receives from money that is coming from there, when you think about the land-based jobs, the cruise sales force, everybody, and now more and more you're seeing more and more Americans working on cruise ships. So I forgot what the number is. It's in the billions as far as the economic impact that the cruise industry has on our economy. So, you want to hold that against them a little bit, do it, but don't ignore the other part, because they certainly do have a significant impact.
You're an American citizen, right?
Yes, sir.
So there's two of us right here who are dependent on the cruise lines for our income for the most part, a big part of it. So, and then, look, and I just want to say, this is my iPhone. I'm not mad that it's made in China, even though it's cheaper, that's the way I look at it. I mean, businesses make decisions not necessarily on emotional, reasons. They make them for business reasons. And look, if you want to not give the cruise line stimulus money, you don't want to give them a loan. They've proven, Carnival said, okay, well, hey, Saudi Wealth Fund, could we have some money? And they're like, yeah, you're a good bet. The cruising industry is super profitable. This is some unforeseen circumstance that nobody could have counted on. Yeah, we'll give you money and make some money back off of you. So I think it's a little weird that and then you see people get uptight about that. Oh, I can't believe we took, Carnival took Saudi money. It's like, well, we didn't give them any money. Might as well take Saudi money. It's an interesting dance for sure.
But I heard something on that, and I don't know if I'm a moron. I don't have all the facts either. But what I heard was that Carnival didn't necessarily, and I could be right, could be wrong. I heard Carnival didn't necessarily initiate that. I heard that the investment branch of the Saudi government was thinking about doing this years ago because they just thought it made sense as an investment. Now, yes, anytime you're going over a certain amount of money, there has to be I's dotted and T's crossed. So yes, there was a meeting of the minds when it comes to all this stuff. But from what I heard, it was basically the price of the stock looked great, and the investment arm of the Saudi Arabian government went in and decided that's what they want. They contacted Carnival, and Carnival basically agreed to it. I don't think from what I heard, it wasn't them going out and soliciting a bailout from the Saudi government.
No, definitely not. Basically, they made, they put themselves for sale, and I believe it was JP Morgan or some banking facility that they engaged, and they said, hey, look, we want to sell this much of ourselves, and we'll pay this much of a return. I think it was some crazy return, like 12% or something like that. And so the bank facilitates that. But yeah, the reporting has to happen. That's where you find out that the Saudis bought that much. But Carnival's a business just trying to survive. I saw that interview again with on CNBC with Donald Arnold. He said they've got enough money. They got $9 billion. They got enough money to make it till the end of the year. And I think Carnival's going to be fine. It's going to be interesting to me what happens with Royal and Norwegian. I'm concerned about Norwegian. Have you given any thought to, some people say, oh, you think these cruise lines are going to go bankrupt? I don't think Carnival's going to go bankrupt, but do you think some of these smaller lines are going to struggle? Bahamas Paradise, Norwegian, you given that any thought or seen anything?
I have given it thought. I also do know enough to know that I don't know. I do know that the Norwegian little mini controversy on what allegedly came from their management as far as the message that was going on in the sales office. If you don't know what I'm talking about, they basically said, you know what, this isn't a real thing, totally downplayed it. Don't worry about the coronavirus. It can't exist in warm climates. The only thing you have to worry about is how much sunscreen to get. You heard these types of things coming out of the office, and the whistle was blown by the sales team. And you wonder how that's going to play out. I said on my last show, if you look at the cruise ships that were affected by this, Norwegian came out, remarkably unscathed by comparison.
Right.
But that's going to get negated by that little scandal that they had there.
Yeah, 100%. And I did hear a lot of that scuttlebutt. Oh, these are all Carnival ships. Why are all these, typical Carnival stuff? It's like, man, when you got the majority of the cruise ships out there, you got a better chance of getting stuff. Yeah, no, that could hurt Norwegian. I do remember that story, and man, if that's pretty scummy, man. If some dude was telling, I couldn't put my head on the pillow at night if I was going, look, just tell them it's okay to get on the cruise ship, and that we'll find out whether or not that happened. But if that did,
well, happen, I could tell you, Tony, I interviewed for a sales position there. I was offered the position. I won't necessarily say that this is a direct correlation. They made it very clear that they wanted to sell cruise and almost, I don't want to say militaristic, but they were like, we don't care about your problems. No offense. We don't care about this. We're here. This is business. We're here to sell cruises at any cost whatsoever. Well, maybe I went too far there, but we're here to sell cruises no matter what. The bottom line was very, very important to them. And I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but my experience going into that room and having conversations with multiple different members of middle management, that message, I wouldn't be shocked. It doesn't shock me that comes out from that.
That one's going to be interesting to follow along. I really think that could hurt their brand loyalty a little bit if it turns out that that's some of their practices. So,
but then what do you think happens to the hardware? You know what I mean? Of course they're vulnerable. Of course they can go down for this, and you don't know if they make it out or not. But what happens to all these cruise ships?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So if Carnival really is in the position to continue to leverage and borrow money, and then the sailing starts again, maybe instead of having 9 cruise lines, Norwegian slides up under Carnival Corporation. Like, I really think that's what happens in these crisis situations. You know, a little social Darwinism, the strongest survive, right? That's old school capitalism. If Carnival can hold on, keep their money in line, and start sailing again, maybe they become a bigger cruise line.
Yeah. And then what do you think about Royal Caribbean?
You know, I haven't seen much about Royal. I've been looking every day to see what they're saying. This is my point of frustration in all this process. I have a Royal Caribbean cruise scheduled for early July. We have a group cruise, and Princess was frustrating me like this also. You know, last month Alaska closed all their ports until the 1st of July. I was scheduled to be on an Alaska cruise mid-June, and Princess didn't cancel that cruise until yesterday, a good 3 or 4 weeks after, 2 or 3 weeks after it was known that cruise wasn't going to happen. I'm in the same boat with Royal. It doesn't seem like cruising is going to happen. At least now I'm waiting for their announcement, but if you follow the CDC, the thing that they released last week, it looks like cruising really couldn't happen until, you know, July the 25th, 26th. So that Royal cruise should cancel, but they're not canceling. Back to your original question, I haven't seen what Royal's cash position is. I know that they were heavily leveraged in their cash when this crisis came about, but I would have to think that the same people that are taking a gamble on Carnival, they would see the same value proposition when it comes to Royal, that cruising is profitable. Royal's led the way with modernizing, revolutionizing the cruising space with the large cruise ship. So I think they would be a good bet for investors. So I think they could put their hands on the money that they need. Just depends how long the whole thing rolls. I don't know. You've been tracking with Royal. What do you think? Do you think they're okay in a cash position, or you think they're going to struggle a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not 100% well versed in that. I don't know how much of their ships are paid off. I know Carnival is pretty solid, especially with a lot of those fantasy class. That's why I would always wonder why they keep running those fantasy class ships around. Now I know it's because it's a great experience, but I also knew back then is because it was just very shareholder friendly. It was assets that were completely paid off. So I know that's probably puts them in a pretty good position, but I do not know where Royal Caribbean is in that regard.
I think it'll become apparent pretty soon. I think we'll see some cancellations coming. I'm watching very closely to see if over the next few days Royal extends their shutdown like Carnival did. I'm kind of hoping, because I've got final payment on that cruise coming up at the end of the week, and I kind of don't really want to pay it off if it's going to be canceled, because then you have to go through the whole process of, do I take a future cruise credit or do I take a refund? So let's jump into that hotbed question. If your buddy's got a cruise booked and he says, "Hey Tommy, should I take the future cruise credit or should I take the refund?" What are you telling your buddy on that question these days?
I would default. Now, there's the other thing about, I guess, some people are having some hard times getting the money, I guess, or getting
taking a while.
Yeah, if the money's coming through, I say reschedule. You get the value there. You get the extra, onboard credit as it pertains to that. But I would also, say, yeah, times are uncertain. You're going to cruise. You're going to go on your cruise. You're eventually going to get there. Putting it off for 30, 60 days isn't going to be the worst thing in the world. So I would say definitely reschedule.
Yeah, I'm in the same vein. I don't necessarily like what I've seen. So my wife Jenny is travel agent. We've rebooked a lot of people's cruises. We've canceled a lot of people's cruises. I don't see a lot of refund money coming back straight away. And so that's what makes it a little bit of a challenge. This is probably a time where people could use to get their money back. But if your money's going to take 60, 90 days to get back to you anyways, I'm kind of tempted to go with the future cruise credit, just because you can get more money for your value, like you said, the onboard credit. But I'm on the fence about whether cruising is going to be more or less expensive when we come back. Everybody's going to have this pent-up demand. Everybody's going to have these future cruise credits. People have been talking about cheap cruises, but I would be shocked if the cruises are super cheap coming back, unless they just can't get people onto cruise ships. I think you might see a pent-up demand all of a sudden pushing prices up a little bit.
Do you think that the reason that it could be taking so long might be because they're still weighing their options and not ruled out any Chapter 11 type stuff? And if that happens, then you know what? Why we don't have to pay anybody?
That's the scariest thing, right? So that is a prevalent theory that you find in the comments of YouTube videos. They're just holding the money so that they can claim bankruptcy and then not have to pay the money back. Here's the thing. Here's my opinion. This is what I believe about business. Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, they want to be cruise lines next year. And so if it comes out that they have held on to people's money with maybe the intention of not giving it back, I think that will hurt them as a cruise line. So the optimist in me says that I hope that these cruise lines are acting in the best faith. I hope they're not holding on to money, trying to see what happens tomorrow. But it could happen, right? At some point, they've got to give the money back. Like, I just don't think they can hold it forever. But, you know, I've canceled a cruise before and got the money back next week. I don't think it's that much different from a process standpoint. You know, so if there is a delay of 90 days, I don't think it's like, oh, the computer has to work harder and now it can't get it out any faster. These, you know, it's not like the old days where we're pushing paper checks around. These are sophisticated computers that are able to, you know, take money from you in an instant and really give money back to you in an instant. So it does give you pause to say, well, why is the money taking so long? Again, you can throw a lot of volume at a computer and it's not going to slow it down. So I don't know.
Could be,
like, I really hope that's not what's happening.
It could be an interest thing as well.
Right, yeah. I mean, hold on to the money, make a little more interest. And if that's the case, it's a little frustrating because I'm not a big corporation with $9 billion. I could use my, you know, $2,000 back. And so, yeah, hopefully that doesn't come out to be true because I think that will sour a lot of people. But again, so many people love cruising. There's that aspect of it. Even like in content creation, you know, there's going to be some people that like you. You know, there's going to be some people that don't like you. And so, you know, you play to the bigger crowd, right? Maybe you're going to make a few people mad with a slow refund, but you're going to make a lot more people happier. They're going to come back to cruising. So maybe we leverage that. I don't know.
So this is apples to oranges, so it's not necessarily comparable at all, but I'll say it anyway. When Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast, it absolutely leveled us. It leveled my whole block. You know, I'm from a middle-class area, and, you know, you saw people, they had their 2 cars that they turned in every couple of years. They had their nice, well-sided houses, and everything was nice, beautifully manicured lawns. It was nice. It was just it was a middle-class neighborhood all up and down the coast of Long Island. And when Hurricane Sandy hit, and I was living in Queens at the time, and I was finally able to get there because it was just a disaster, my eyes were not prepared for what I saw. My eyes were not prepared to see these same people on front lawns just trying to stay warm with fire pits, and, you know, everybody had to rip up their houses. Everybody had to clean out there. It was starting from scratch around every corner, and that was for my block. So it was for every other block in the neighborhood. It was for every other town in the island. It was Jersey Shore up and down. I was, in my mind, I'm like, I looked at it, and just the eye test alone, I was like, how do we come back? How do we come back from this? Who comes back? Where is the money that's going to allow us to come back from this? And guess what? We came back from it. It's like it never happened at this point. Economics aside, there might have been some issues, there might have been some changes, but other than that, everybody is back to where they were. And during the time, you never would have thought it would have happened. I'm holding on to that little piece of faith and hoping that it kind of transfers to the cruise industry. We never thought of it like right now. It'll never be the same again. I'm just hoping, you know what, maybe we're just resilient and it comes back to where it was.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's a really positive thing to bring up. You know, we just ran through Easter. I made a little video on that day, and, you know, springtime, Easter, regardless of what you believe spiritually or not spiritually, you know, springtime, Easter, it's a time of hope. And I do believe it, right? Like, our life is the ebb and flow. It's cyclical, right? Good things happen to you, bad things happen to you. And then when you're in the good time, you have to think back and go, oh, I remember the bad time. But in the bad time, it's a challenge. And so I think that, you know, it's cliche, right? This too shall pass. The reason it's a cliche is because it's true. You know, most of the time, unless it's very unfortunate, most of the time you don't live in the despair more than you live in the good time. And so I agree with you. I think that we'll get, it may be middle of next year where all of a sudden we look back at this and go, man, you remember that time we had to deal with the virus outbreak, how it disrupted life, but things are normal again? I think 100% it'll get to be that way. For sure.
I do too. You have to. You have to.
Yeah. Well, man, I think that's a great thing to end the conversation on. I can't commend your podcast enough. Just anybody out there seeing this, there's a few ways that you can check out Tommy. The main way is the Always Be Booked podcast. You can find that wherever you can find podcasts. And then you also have a YouTube channel, the Always Be Booked YouTube. And I tell you, I love your reaction videos over there. I would commend people to go check out some of the reaction videos. And then you also have a website. And is that alwaysbebooked.com or .net?
Yes, alwaysbebooked.com as well.
And then also you have a presence on Facebook, and your Facebook community's got an interesting name. What's your Facebook community?
It's a group. It's called the Always Be Booked Cruisers Ultra Lounge. And on Facebook.
That is a fun place to go. So if you like to have a good time and you like to hang out with cruisers that may test the fates by running the pier, that's the spot for you, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the only thing I'll say, I'll just reiterate what I said before. I just think it's like anything. It's not anything that's not necessarily made for mainstream. It's an acquired taste. So give it a little bit of a shot. If you like it, stick around. If not, I'll be right there with you watching Lido Loca.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much for spending some time, and we got to do this again.
Definitely. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, man. Wow, great conversation with Tommy. Such a cool guy. Really the first time I got to sit down and talk with him. I hope to have more conversations with Tommy in the future. We said a lot. We did a lot. Just a few more things to talk about here on the podcast. If you need help with your cruise travel, if you need help with any travel at all, my wife is the best travel agent I know. Reach out to Jenny. You got a future cruise credit. You got a question about a refund. You need somebody to work with you, to work with the cruise lines to get what you need. Jenny is the person for it. You can contact her at her email address, jbarnette, that's JBARNETTE, at cruiseshipcenters.com. Send her an email and she will start working with you. It doesn't cost anything to use a travel agent. You're getting her expertise for free. Make sure you reach out to Jenny. And if you want to see a video version of this podcast, if you're not watching it currently, you can find this podcast at the Lido Loca podcast YouTube channel. And if you want to stay up to date on travel and cruising content, follow the daily shows at Lido Loca Travel YouTube channel. Links are in the show notes in the description below. Well, a big thanks to Tommy. This has been episode 17 of the Lido Loca podcast. My name's Tony, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.